Alaikum. This is the last lecture of this week, and next week is your midterm. And as I have said earlier also, that I will communicate with you the details about the midterm, writing assignment for your exam, midterm exam. 11th century Arab traveler Biruni wrote, "The so-called scientific theorems of the Hindus are in a state of utter confusion, devoid of any logical order, and in the last instance always mixed with the silly notions of the crowd." And then in the 11th century, he's saying this about India, and then again he continues, "I can only compare their mathematical and astronomical literature, as far as I know, to a mixture of pearls and dung, or of costly crystals and common pebbles. Both kinds of things are equal in their eyes, since they cannot raise themselves to the methods of a strictly scientific deduction." In sharp contrast to this dismal, decayed state of the late classical period, we know that the science was vibrantly alive in India in the early classical period. An Indian scientist of the age made several seminal contributions in astronomy, mathematics, and medicine, but the night began to close in on India in the second half of the millennium CE. The most highly esteemed field of scientific study in classical India was astronomy, as it had been so since Vedic times, when it was regarded as Vedanga, a limb of the Vedas, its main function being to fix the date and time for performing sacrifices. As you must have seen in Indian movies, the Shubh Ghadi. From this rudimentary beginning, astronomy gradually developed by the early centuries of Common Era into a distinct and sophisticated field of study. As astronomical studies advanced in India, they came under the influence of Greeks, who were the leading astronomers of the ancient world. The Yavanas, Greeks, are indeed Malachas, but astronomy is firmly established among them, and they are revered as sages, writes Varhamahira, a leading Indian scientist of the classical age. And it is very interesting to note that the 4th century Alexandria, an astronomer, Paul, comes to it that there are obviously connected with the Roman Empire, that these Sanskritized Greek astronomical terms are found in his writings in Varahamihira. Early astronomical calculation in India were based on a chart of the heavenly divided into 27 lunar mansions, named after the star group where the moon resides for a day in succession. So, but later, this concept of the week is believed for 7 days, believed to have originated in prehistoric Mesopotamia, but it came to India quite late and began to appear in inscriptions only towards the close of the 5th century CE, and in literature and in the following century. Indians borrowed several such astronomical ideas from the Middle East and the Greco-Roman world, but whatever they borrowed, they refined with their exceptional skills in mathematics, so that their reputation as astronomers soon spread far and wide. Indian astronomical concepts became well established in the Middle East, and from there eventually spread to Europe. Sanskrit texts of the classical age mention several ancient works on astronomy, but all these have been lost, and little more than the names of their author is known. The oldest extant Indian astronomical texts date back to only about 5th century CE. Ayabhatya is a very succinct text of just 118 verses, so the aid of commentaries and the guidance of a guru are essential for understanding it. Compared to Aryabhata, Varahamihira was a lesser genius, but he was a marvelous, versatile and prolific sage who excelled in several fields. Not only astronomy, but astrology, meteorology, iconography, agriculture, architecture, and so on, and wrote several major works on these subjects, such as Pancha Siddhantika, a compendium of 5 astronomical systems, and Bihat Samhita, an encyclopedic work dealing with many branches of contemporary knowledge, and Bihat Jataka, a treatise on astrology. So he belonged, as his name indicates, to a Brahmanized family of the Magi, sun worshippers, Zoroastrian priest, and he himself came to be regarded as later times as an incarnation of sun god. Brihat Sahamita, his magnum opus, fittingly opens with an obeisance to the sun, the source of the universe. Another great astronomer, astrologer of the age was Brahmagupta of the 7th century. He estimated the Earth's circumference to be 5,000 yojanas, which, assuming that his yojana about 4.5 miles, as Basham concludes, works out to 36,203 kilometers, which is very close to the actual measure of 40,089 kilometers, and is accurate as any given by any ancient astronomer. The last great Indian astronomer was Bhaskara of the early 12th century, belonging to Andhra country, which is known as Andhra Pradesh today. Some of the theories and discoveries of these astronomers were contrary to Hindu religious notions and myths and proved controversial. The astronomical discoveries of Indian scientists were revolutionary, but even more fascinating than these were the soaring speculations of Indian mystics about the process of cosmos. These are incredibly complex concepts, and though they have no empirical basis, whatever they harmonize fairly well with modern scientific theories in several respects. Unlike the biblical notion of the universe as a finite entity just a few thousand years old, Indian astronomers consider the universe as immeasurably large and inconceivably complex, and billions of years old, timeless in fact, revolving in endless cycles of evolution and dissolution, expansion and contraction in time without beginning or end. This was not just a vague notion, but a precise concept elaborated in mind-boggling details. According to Indian mystics, the primary cosmos cycle consists of one lifetime of Brahma lasting 100 cosmic years, which is reckoned as to 311,040 billion Earth years. And within this primary cosmic cycle are various other cycles and further cycles within those internal cycles. So that is their mathematics coming to aid the astronomy. There are thus 36,324, 100 cycles in all within the primary cycle of the one lifespan of Brahma. The Kalpa, a day in the life of Brahma, is equal to 8640 million Earth years. And during this period, in the daytime of each day of Brahma, the world evolves out of him and returns to be reabsorbed into him during the night time. The Mahayuga, the smallest of the cosmic cycles, is the cycle of the world as we know. It has no cycles within it, but its rotation has 4 sequential phases called yugas: Krita, Treta, Devapara, and Kali. The Kali Yuga is a Hobbesian world in which the life of man is nasty, brutish, and short. The entire historical period of man belongs to Kali Yuga. It began according to Hindu tradition in 3102 BCE, the Puranic date of Mahabharata war, and would last 432,000 years. The end of the Kali Yuga would mark the end of current Mahayuga, when our world will perish in fire, but only to rise again another Mahayuga. Brahma is now believed to be in his midlife, aged 51. So there are still 409 billion years left for the end of the current life of Brahma. Interesting. Classical Indian astronomers usually doubled as astrologers. If a man wants to gain the title of an astronomer, he must not only know scientific or mathematical astronomers, but also astrology, observed Al-Biruni. But Indians took to the study of astrology rather late in their history. And the belief that celestial bodies influence earthly life had its origin in Mesopotamia in the mid-2nd millennium BCE, but it seems to have entered India only many centuries later. Later, in the early centuries of the Common Era, astrology in India came under the influence of Greeks, who had by then become celebrated as great masters in astrology. The basic concept of Indian astrology are the same those of Greek astrology, but there is a distinct difference. Instead of blindly copying the Greek system, Indians adapted the derived astrological concept to suit their social system and religious beliefs. So Indians so greatly elaborated the Greek system by adding lunar mansions, nakshatras, and amplifying planetary periods and combinations. Initially, there was a good amount of opposition to astrology in India. Buddhists were generally scorn of it and denounced it, along with all forms of divination, as a low art. The most renowned Indian authority on astrology in the classical age was Varaha Mihira, and he dealt with all the three aspects of astrology: its astronomical and mathematical base, the method of casting horoscope, and the technique of making predictions. Varaha Mihira, what might be called a scientific astrologer, who based his predictions on mathematical calculations, on astronomical data, and he was scornful of clairvoyance and oculists. Varahimira also laid down in detail the qualities desirable in an astrologer, a learner or scholar, presumably idealizing his own qualities. He writes, an astrologer should belong to a noble family, be good looking, of modest demeanor, truthful, free from jealousy, impartial, with well proportioned strong limb and joints, without any deformity, with beautiful hands, feet, nails, eyes, chin, teeth, ears, forehead, brows, and head, with a well formed body and a voice deep and sonorous. He must be clever, efficient, bold, eloquent, possessed. It is like his own pen picture. Unlike in astronomy and mathematics, India did not make much progress in physical sciences, even though there was a good amount of theorizing in ancient India about the nature of material world, and there was a strong streak of materialism in most of the early Indian philosophical schools. All individualities, whether of being or things, are results of particular combination of a matter. These were revolutionary ideas, but they remained in the realm of philosophical speculation in India and did not lead to any empirical exploration of material world. Indians were also familiar with alchemy from the early centuries of the Common Era, and it attracted a lot of attention from tantrics in the late classical period. And Indians were also indifferent to the study of geography. Puranic geography, remarks Kosambi, makes a sad contrast with the clear Chinese itineraries and the still clearer description by Arab travelers. And in geology and climatology, Indian concepts were quite rudimentary, and even the greatest scientists of the age had very peculiar notions about them. Typical of this is the statement Varaha Mihira on rainfall. From the quantity of rain falling in the moon's conjunction with Purva Asadha directly after the day of the full moon of Jesta, taken in conjunction with good or evil omens, experts should predict the quantity of water to be expected during the rainy season. So we can see that these kind of things do not really qualify for science, but they were trying to mix it up with religion, while in mathematics and astrology they were masters. Thank you so very much. Khuda Hafiz.